Welcome again. This is this year's first webinar as part of the Genesys webinar series that we started last year. Last year, we focused on passport data preparation, and this year we will revisit that and look at uploads. But we decided that as a first webinar for this year, we focus on trade data, characterization and evaluation data upload. We will probably not be able to cover everything in this session, so we will split it up into many parts. So I assume everybody has been able to access the trade data sample. And when it comes to the login details, I will paste them in the chat again in case anyone wishes to log into our test platform that is called Sandbox. I will stop sharing my screen right now and move to that Sandbox platform where we will be doing this test demonstration. It's only for test purpose. Let me share my screen again in Sandbox. All right. You should be able to see that this is not the actual Genesys website that we're looking at. This is our test website, and in the chat, I have pasted username and a password. So I will be logging in using those credentials by pasting the username here and the password here. We will all be using the same account just for today. So I will paste it here and paste the password. You might already have a Sandbox account. I know a lot of our GeneBank partners have access to Sandbox, but we ask you please today to use this test account because we will be publishing on a demo, using a demo GeneBank code. So if you have logged in already, it means that you should be able to access here your dashboard. And in this dashboard, you should be able to see trade data menu and the submenu datasets. Because we're all using the same account that has permission on this demo GeneBank, you should be able to add a dataset here. So this is where we will be doing the upload. I mentioned in an email that we don't need any locally installed software to upload trade data in to Genesys like we do with passport data. We will be doing it right here. And we will use an Excel file that has trade data as a demonstration file. Let me open it right now. So before we start using the web-based uploading tool, I want to show you first what is important to have in your Excel file before you move on into uploading it into Genesys or Sandbox. The first things we need to check, other than having your trade data, we need to have just basic minimal passport data in the Excel file. Those minimal basic passport data are institute code. I'm using here Gary in Kenya as an example. The genus, only the genus name, no species name or subspecies in that column, just the genus, it's very important. The accession number, and when it applies, if the accession number has a DOI, also the DOI has to be included. In this case, it doesn't apply, so we don't have DOI in this file, but a lot of you already have acquired DOI and uploaded them to Genesys. So for those accessions that you want to publish trade data to, please make sure to include those DOIs. As you see here, the column names are sometimes in MCPD, sometimes not. Unlike passport data upload, the trade data upload doesn't necessarily have to be standardized. And that is because our uploading web-based tool has the ability to allow you to standardize it as you are uploading. So very important to have these this minimal information, because this is what will allow you to link your trade data to these accessions in Genesys. Which brings me to another point. Before uploading trade data for these accessions in Genesys, you need to have the passport data for these accessions in Genesys. So these accessions need to have existing passport data before uploading trade data to them. So if you want to do a little, like a quick check before you start uploading, if those accessions, do they all exist in Genesys right now? Do they all have passport data, or did you miss some of them in previous uploads? A very easy way to do this check is to just select all of these accessions in the accession number column, copy them, and then go to Genesys. In this case, we are going to Sandbox. And go to the accession data, passport data browser. You will see here the filter for accession number. So you just paste all the accessions that you copied from Excel. This will paste them all here in this filter. And then you hit apply filters. And you see all of these accessions. So 193 do not really correspond to this number, because here we have 194 accessions. So one of them isn't yet in Genesys, which is this one, the very last one. I did it on purpose. I will show you later when we start uploading what happens if you start uploading trade data for an accession that doesn't have passport data in Genesys. It will not be included in the upload at all. So now I made sure that most of them are there. I also notice that for some of these accessions, the genus name is missing. It's completely blank. And for another one of the accessions, this says here solanum instead of sorghum. So I will copy only these two accession numbers to see, like, this is kind of weird, strange. This should have a genus name. And this, I know that all of these accessions are supposed to be sorghum, but this is written solanum. So those are probably two data entry errors. And when you upload this Excel file to proceed with uploading trade data, this will create an error. So this will not, the trade data upload will not include these two accessions, because the genus here is blank and wrong. And this one doesn't even exist in Genesys as passport data. So these three will be skipped. I'm just showing you what kind of mishaps could happen that will drag on to the entire trade data upload. And there's no way to really fix it other than re-uploading the same file again and doing the work again. So it's very important to do these little checks on Excel and between Excel and Genesys first, to make sure that from the beginning it's all going well before you proceed. And that's what we're doing right now. So I will select these two accession numbers just to double check their genus. So I will clear here my accession number filter and repaste just those two and apply filter. And I will go to the accessions tab just to see the genus. So you see here, this is supposed to be sorghum, the 19. So I go back to Excel. 19 is supposed to be sorghum. And the 54 is supposed to be Phaseolus. So I can choose to ignore it or delete it from this file. Or if I know for sure that this accession is sorghum, and in Genesys, it's supposed to be sorghum as well, so the genus name in Genesys is wrong, then a step before proceeding with the upload is actually fixing the genus over here. So you might need this work before, this little pre-work, pre-preparation before. So I could choose to ignore this accession, or I could go to my uploader tool to fix the genus name. That would be up to you. So it's important to do these checks. And I could choose also before to proceed to include this accession here that doesn't exist at all in Genesys, to upload its passport data in order to include it in this trade data upload. But for the moment, I will just delete those last three, and I will proceed with the remaining ones that we have. So I'll save my file, and I want to now upload my file to start working on it directly in Genesys. So I go to my dashboard. From the menu trade data, I select datasets, and I click the plus button here below. So this will start many steps. First one is completing the basic information about this trade data. So who's the data provider? Who's your gene bank? On behalf of which gene bank are you uploading? All of us right now have access to demo from the account I shared with you in the chat. And please, for the dataset title, normally it would be something like characterization of sorghum accessions in 2016, something like that. This would be the normal name of your dataset. Just for today, I ask you please to name your dataset starting with your name. If you are doing this demonstration also, if you are practicing this demonstration right now on Sandbox using the same account, just add your name, because we are all using the same account and we don't want to get confused which dataset is created by who when we exit it and go back to it. So I'm going to add my name and the dataset version. So this could be the year when the dataset was created, or it could be the version number. For example, this is version 1.0. If I go back to edit this trade data at any point, it could become 1.1, 1.2 when I do further edits later on. For now, it's 1.0. The dataset description usually is created maybe by the curator or the creators of that trade dataset. It could be something like characterization of sorghum of 190 sorghum accessions as part of the 2016 project, etc. The next, oh, sorry, that's the date, not the description. So that's the description here, and the date follows this format. It follows the format year, month, day of when the dataset was created. So right now it's created on 2024, February the 2nd, and it follows this format. The rights is basically the licensing rights. It basically, you get to choose how do people cite if they use this data set in a publication, or if they want to refer to this data set or use this data. What are the attribution rights? Usually our partners use the fourth one, attribution non-commercial. So it's not commercial and it's international, and people have to give attribute this data to your gene bank when they use it. The language is normally in English, so just type EN, or just type the language English. The source means if this dataset has been part of a journal publication. Sometimes your curators or managers have published in a journal, and you can include the source here. You can also include the source if your dataset has been also published in parallel on your own institute's website. You can also include the source there. And you can select from this list of crops, which crop does this dataset belong to? So in this case, sorghum is over here. So once you did this basic information, you move on to the next. So to do the upload of the Excel file, please click on this button, add dataset file, and then click on upload file. Then you pick it from your downloads or somewhere, and then you will see that below you have this file that's right there with a link titled Load Trade Data to Genesys. I'm going to go a little bit slower right now to make sure everybody's on the same page. Everybody has uploaded, because when we click this button right now, Load Trade Data to Genesys, we're going to go directly to the uploader tool on the web. So click on it, and you will see your Excel file that has, all the trade data and the accession numbers and the genus directly in Genesys. We don't have a lot of trades in this file. Maybe we have around 10 maximum. You see this column, the first one, is empty, and it's titled accession. This is what the tool has added as a column. It's not included in Excel. When it's empty, please don't proceed, because the first step right now, we want to populate this column, and I'll show you how. So when this column is empty, it means that these accession numbers and this Excel file is not linked to any passport data in Genesys. These accession numbers are not linked to their passport data in Genesys right now. That's why this is empty. The first step is to make sure we do this linking, and we do it right. And when we do it right, this column will be populated with the same accession numbers over here with a link for each one of them. So the first step is to click on properties, that is right here. Make sure that the dataset crop is sorghum and that the dataset owner is demo. So that's the gene bank, fictional gene bank we're uploading to. That the default inst code is the same as the one in your file. In this case, it's KEN 212. And that the default genus is sorghum, capital S. So capital S, sorghum. And we click here on updates. So we make sure that all of these are populated correctly. And then we click on update as a first step. The second step would be to link the institute code, the genus, and the accession number columns to the passport data that is in Genesys. And for that, I will start with institute code. So I will click on the title of the column right here. And this will open this dialog box. So this, you will see that this dialog box is split into two. There's the left side and the right side. The left side over here and the right side. The right side starts with describing your data, starting by the column name that we have and the title. I want to link the inst code column here in my file to the inst code descriptor in Genesys. So in order to do that, it's already in an MCPD format. So I just keep it as it is. I click here, change nothing, and just press enter. And you see here, I have my original column name inst code, and it's doubled dash inst code. That's what the tool added, which means that the tool was able to link this inst code column in my file to the inst code in Genesys. And so I'm going to do the same for genus and accession number. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to click this arrow in gray to move on to the next column here, that is genus. The column name, original one, is genus. The title is genus. I want to change only the column name. The title is what shows to the users. The column name is kind of internal, just between us. And I want to change it to conform to MCPD. so that I can link this genus column to the MCPD descriptor of Genesys called genus, but it's supposed to be in all caps. So I delete the column name here and I type it in all caps. That is the MCPD format of genus column in Genesys. So I type in genus all caps and press enter. And I see here that I have the column name genus all caps dash the original column name. And this means that it was successful. The tool was able to link the genus column in my file to the genus in Genesys. So in order to exit this dialog box, I can click anywhere on the gray area once, because I want to skip block, plot number, rep, all of these I don't want to include. So I can just skip them. And I want to move straight to accession number. So I click on this column title, accession number, and I do the same for column name. I want to erase the original one and I want to rewrite it in the MCPD form. So it's ACCEN UMB. That's the accession number MCPD standard format, all in caps, ACCEN UMB, and create, and then I have to press enter also. And then I want to exit this dialog box to see what happened. And it's a success right here. I was able to link the accession number original column to accession number descriptor in Genesys. But I haven't registered my accessions yet. I have to still press this button over here, titled Register Accessions, right next to Properties. So press the button Register Accessions and wait a little bit. And you see that this first column is now all populated with the accession numbers and their link. So this is the link to their passport data. And only after I've done this step, I can proceed to do the same mapping that I just did for inst code, genus, and accession number. I do the same mapping for the rest of the columns, and I link them to descriptors, existing characterization and evaluation descriptors in Genesys. You see here, I can filter already. And I want to filter just to do a little double check before I proceed. I just want to double check that all of the accessions are linked. And for that purpose, I untick this second row here, accession exists for now, and I only keep row not mapped to accession. So I'm asking Genesys to filter only the empty fields in this column. And I apply filters, and I see that there are no records matching this criteria. So I know that all of the accessions here are linked to Genesys. You can also click on Reset Filter to go to your original file here. I'll do it again. So if you want to check that none of the cells here are empty, so if you want to check that all of the accessions are linked into passport data to Genesys, you untick the second line and you apply filters. You make sure that no records match, and then you reset from the filter here. Whatever column that you don't map to a descriptor in Genesys will be skipped. And as I said, I am skipping block, plot number, rep. Those are not included in any characterization and or evaluation data. Those were just for the data collection on the field as reference points. So I will skip those. I also skip the stand count. This is not trade data. And I will go to leaf mid-rip color. So I want to map this one to an existing descriptor in Genesys. So I click the column name here, and I will reopen this dialog box. So you see here on the left side, we haven't used that yet, but you can read find existing descriptor. So if you're not familiar with the descriptor lists in Genesys, you could upload these descriptors, leaf midrib color, grain size, grain shape, leaf shape, all of these you can upload in Genesys individually as descriptors. And you can link your own data to these existing descriptors in Genesys by trying to search for leaf midrib color and pressing enter. Or just typing the crop name and pressing enter. If you type the crop name, then you have access to all of the descriptors that are found in Genesys for that crop. So here, we see that we have existing descriptors for sorghum that are called plant height, that are called percentage of germination, plant aspect, etc. But I was not able to find the leaf midrib color category. So what I can do instead, if I don't have an existing descriptor in Genesys, then I can create my own. So I can create the leaf midrib color descriptor and create the allowed values for it, and then map my trade data to this existing, to the descriptor that I just created. So before I add this descriptor in Genesys, I want to make sure that this descriptor is referenced somewhere, that there is either a PDF publication by the FAO or IPCRI. Those are the most commonly used descriptor lists, or if your own gene bank has its own descriptor lists with metadata, so with the allowed values, with what do these descriptors mean, how do you capture this data, all of this is important to have at hand before you add your own descriptor to Genesys over here. So for the leaf midrib color, I will use an existing sorghum characterization publication. And the descriptor list that we have in the Genesys website that doesn't exist in the test website that we have here. So I will refer to it. This is the IBPGR and ICRISAT publication of descriptors for sorghum that was published in 1993. And I will show you how we can, based on this list, create our own descriptor right here, if it's not already existing. So I will look for the leaf midrib color descriptor, and I will copy the title. So that's leaf midrib color. I will paste it in the title, not in the column name. This is how it will show to the users in the final data set. If in the same leaf midrib color column, if in the same cell I have multiple values, I'm able to separate, I'm able to indicate to this tool what are these multiple values separated by. So what's the separator? Is it a comma? Is it a dash? Is it a semicolon? If your values are unique in every cell, if you don't have multiple values in the same cell, you can ignore this third line here and move on to the next one. The next one is a sample of values from your file. So this is giving you all a sample of the values that this tool was able to find from your file. So you have, in this column, you have purple, W, white, and a little bit of typos, right? This is just for your information. How does your data look like? The second line is about the data type. So you have different data types for descriptors. The most common one is coded, but you also have scale, numeric, text, date, etc. So if it's a number in centimeters, a height, a length, you choose numeric. But if it's a category, which is the case here for color, then you choose coded. You choose scale only if it's categorical data that is in a certain hierarchy that follows a certain order. For example, a type of scale is small, medium, large, or high, low, medium. This is a scale. So it's a category, but that follows a certain order. For the colors here, they are categories, they don't follow any order of hierarchy. So we use coded. And here, in the next step, you will be able to select what are the allowed terms. So what are the terms that you want to allow in this descriptor called leaf midrib color? So one note to keep in mind, this doesn't mean what are the allowed terms only in this trait data set. It means in general, for leaf midrib color for sorghum, what are the allowed colors? Even if they don't exist even if they don't happen to be part of your trait data set here as individual entries. So for that, I go to the leaf midrib color descriptor from the source that I have. It could be a PDF, it could be an online source. From here, I'm using the Genesys. And I see that the allowed colors are much more than I have. They're white, dull green, yellow, brown, purple, and other. And they go from 1 to 6. So what I would do is I would split my screen in two. That's the easiest thing to do. If you use a PDF, you would also need to do the same. It involves a little bit of manual work, but later on, it will save a lot of time. So I will first copy the code, number 1, and select white. Then dull green is number 2. Number 3 is yellow. Make sure that you put them in the same order, that you see them in the PDF or in your source. Number 4 is brown. Number 5 is purple. And number 6 is other. And you see here, there's an additional row that you can just delete by clicking this icon here. So I have them listed in order as they are in my source. And it's always, always important to include a description of what does that term mean. So I will copy the descriptions also and paste them and make sure I am pasting to the right color here. You might have more extensive descriptions, longer ones. The more descriptions you have, the better. And if you want to add any term to this list, if you have more, then you click on Insert or Append. So both do the same thing, except that Insert will add a term in the beginning, and Append will add a term in the end. And you can choose to remove all of these and do them over again. So now that I have my terms, I have my allowed, all of my allowed values, even if they are not as part of this sample, but these are all the allowed colors for leaf midrib color. And I have their description, they are in order. I move on to the next step. That is to include, identify what is the category of this descriptor. Is it characterization? Is it evaluation? Is it for the management? Is it biostress, biotic stress, abiotic stress, molecular, what type of category is leaf midrib color. And in this case, it's morphological characterization. So I keep characterization and I make sure that the correct crop is sorghum. And if everything is okay, I click on update description. So after I click on update description, I move on to the next step. That is to fix any irregularities in the data. And I see here that in my sample file above, so in sample values, I have values that don't correspond to these allowed terms. I have values that are W, Y, white with many E's, yellow with many W's. So I have things that don't correspond to these validation criteria here. And the tool is able to identify that in the second step. The second step is basically cleaning up your sample file based on these criteria above. So you can choose to remap values in your data. Otherwise, they will not be included if they don't correspond to these terms here. So you have to correct the W, the Y, and the typos. For that purpose, you can try clicking on the guess button. So basically, you see what happened. This tool guessed that purple is 5, which is true, that white is 1, that the tool automatically did that on its own. That's true. And that yellow is 3. But now I want to manually continue this remapping. So I want to map W to 1 also. If I want to choose that W is actually supposed to be white, then I say, please link W to white, which is code number 1. And also white with many E's, also link it to 1. So all of these 3 are supposed to be 1, which is white. And that W is supposed to be yellow, which is 3. And also yellow with many W's is supposed to be 3. So I'm doing kind of a cleanup as I upload. So after I do this remapping here, I apply corrections. And the tool now tells me that all the values that I remapped and all the values are now matching the column descriptor that I just created above. So the third step, because this descriptor is not existing in Genesys, or in Sandbox actually, where we are working, I will register it as a new descriptor in Genesys, but before I do that, I need to make sure that I need to have the methodology of this descriptor. So how is this data usually collected for leaf midrib color, and the language. And for that, I will find the methodology here. It could be in a PDF file that you have. It could be in notes from your gene bank, but it's important to include the methodology and the language, EN, before registering this new descriptor in Genesys. And now the tool tells me that column changes are applied. And after that, I scroll to the very end and I have to make sure to click on register observations in order to link the leaf midrib color to that new descriptor that I just created here right now. And you see that I have my original column title with a dash, the new title. I want to click on View Dataset to see if I'm able to preview. And I see here in the preview of leaf mid, so I see here in the preview, I have the accessions and a link to their passport data. And I have only the leaf midrib color because that's the only column of trait data that I linked to a descriptor, or that I created a descriptor for. But that's the only trait data column in here that is linked and validated and registered as observation. So this is how your users, or this is how the users of Genesys will see this trade data set, and they will be able to filter for the leaf midrib color, so for the accessions, based on whether they're white, dull green, yellow, brown, purple, etc. So I will show you an example. If they filter for white and apply filters, then Genesys will only show the accessions that have leaf midrib color white and yellow, and purple. So I'll reset. That's just the preview. And the way I landed on this preview again is by clicking here, right-click, open link in new tab on the view dataset, just to preview what we have so far. And it's always a good idea to do this every once in a while, just to make sure that everything's going well, you know, that the mappings have worked well, that you can filter well. It's always good to do it every few descriptors, right? So I will do the same for the remaining descriptors here, for the remaining columns. And the remaining columns are different types of data. So I have here numeric. This numeric values here are integers. They don't have any decimals, but here they do have decimals. So I will show you the different data types. And we have here a scale, low, intermediate, high. So that's the scale, this type of descriptor that we talked about. Yeah, and also another type of scale descriptor, but using numbers instead of text. So we did already the leaf midrib color. So I want to show you, okay, I just exited the dialog box just to move to plant height, to show you how we can map to an existing descriptor, because we just saw how we can create a new descriptor. Two of you already created it, that's great. Now what happens if we want to link to an existing one? So click on plant height here as a title. And you see here automatically we have a plant height descriptor in Genesys, right? For sorghum. And we see it's a numeric type, which is what we want. It should be positive, so larger than 0, because it's in centimeters, has to be. So I choose this one. So if I want to link this column to this existing descriptor in Genesys that I have already made last year, all I have to do is just click on it. So I click here, and I see that column changes are applied. My column name in my own Excel file is now linked to this new title, to this new existing descriptor in Genesys. And here are a sample of values from my file. They go from 105 to 147. The data type is numeric. This is already the existing descriptor information. So this plant height descriptor here that I linked to from the left side is already predetermined that it's numeric, it should be larger than 0, and that it is continuous. So plant height is continuous because it could have a decimal, as you see here. So 123.333. So I could have in centimeters, I could have decimals. It doesn't have to be an entire integer number. So in this case, it's true that the numeric value type here is continuous, not discrete. It's true that it's a characterization column for sorghum. The description of the methodology is that it's measured from X to Y. This should be accompanied by a picture. And I'll show you later in other parts how you can add the picture to see, to say where is X and where is Y. So I make sure that it's all good. I link to this existing descriptor. It all makes sense. And I click on Update Description. And I read that column changes are applied. I move on to the second step to fix irregularities in my data. When I see this green check mark, that's the relief, because it means all my values match this description above. So they are all numeric values. There's no text in my Excel. They're all larger than 0. You could specify a maximum value allowed in your descriptor. We'll see how we do that later. But at least I know they're all positive values and decimal continuous numbers. So it's all good. In the second step, I can just proceed to register these observations directly. So I click on this register observations button, and I read that observations are imported to this new descriptor. And I will preview now what happens. So I will right-click on View Dataset here and open it in a new tab to show you that now this plant height descriptor is included after leaf midrib color, because I only mapped these two. And the way I filter for a numeric type of descriptor would be by indicating here the minimum and maximum values. So for example, if I want to filter for all the accessions that have a plant height higher than 190, so I type in 190 centimeters. I type 190 here and click on Apply Filters. So this means that there are 124 accessions in this data set that have a plant height higher than 190 centimeters. If I want the maximum height to be 190, so I want to filter for all the accessions that have a maximum height of 190 centimeters, I type the 190 in the maximum line, and I click on Apply Filters, and I see that I have filtered for all of these accessions here have a plant height lower than 190, which is what I want. And if I want exactly 190 as a height, then I type 190 both in the minimum and maximum, if I want this exact number, and I hit Apply Filters. And you see there are 4 accessions in this case. So this is just like to play around and preview what I've done so far. How does it filter? And yeah, I will close this window and go back to my trade data uploader. So I've showed you how you create your descriptor, you know, how you create it on your own if it's not existing in Genesys, and how you map to an existing descriptor in Genesys. So let's try to map others. Let's try with 50% flowering. We have here a lot of 50% flowering descriptors that the tool was able to find on its own, like existing descriptors in Genesys. I'm going to try to find some for sorghum, because here there's for groundnut, pigeon pea. I'm not sure if it's the same methodology. I'm not sure. So I will try to scroll for sorghum. And that's why it's always good to add the description of the descriptor. You know, it's always good to have this description. Doesn't seem like we have one for sorghum. So I will show you how you can add this descriptor right here. Okay, just to double check, I will type sorghum and search for it in this box. So I have plant height, percentage of germination, plant aspect, and the ones we just created. Okay. So I want to title this new column. So this is my existing one, 50% flowering. But I want to title this column in a different way, like in a way that users are okay with reading. You know, that's not all caps lock, that has a bit more information. So I will title it days to 50% flowering. Okay. If I don't have multiple values in the same cell, I can just skip this line. Otherwise, I can add the separator. I see that there are samples here. This is the sample from my own column for my information. And here I can select the data type. This tool already detects that, you know, this is number. So it suggests that it's numeric, which is true. The unit of measurement in this case is days. The minimum value of this descriptor is 0. And why did I choose 0, not 50? Because it's very important to indicate the minimum value allowed for days of flowering. It might not make sense 0 as a day. Maybe it should be minimum of 1 at least. But the logical thing to do is that to say at least the values have to be positive. They have to be more than 0 as a minimum. And do not indicate the minimum number here, like the smallest number you have in your file. This is not what minimum allowed value means. It doesn't mean that you should indicate the smallest number in your sample, but it should mean that what's the validation criteria of this descriptor, days to flowering. The really logical minimum is 0 or 1 because it should be positive. That's the idea. So I've added some minimal validation criteria here. And now I move on to specify which type of numeric value is it? Is it discrete or is it continuous? So can I have a decimal? Can it be 1.5 days, 1.2 days, or does it have to be 1 day, 2 days, 3 days? In this case, it's supposed to be discrete. So I click on discrete. It's only integers. I don't want any decimals in the days. So that's also a basic validation criteria. And the descriptor category in this case is indeed characterization. So I keep it for the crop name sorghum. So after I make sure it's all okay, my title looks good. There's no errors here. I click on update description. So after I've updated the description, I move on to the second step, which is fixing the irregularities. I see that it's a green check mark, meaning that all the values in my file here in this file that I have in Excel that I uploaded, they are all numerical values. There's no text. They are all discrete numbers that are positive. Nothing is negative. So this is what this means. And the third step would be to register this new descriptor that I created above, to register it in Genesys directly. So the version is 2024. I add a methodology of collecting data for this descriptor. You should find the methodology either in the PDF that you have for the descriptor list that you use, or if it's indicated in your gene bank, if you have a standard operating procedure or any descriptor list that you have internally, you should add the methodology here. And then you indicate the language code, which is English, EN, and then you register a new descriptor in Genesys by clicking this button. And then you have to register the observations to that new descriptor. So you click on register observations here in this button. And now I will click on the gray area outside this dialog box, and I see what happens here in this column. I have my original title, 50% flowering, linked to this new descriptor that I created, days to 50% flowering, right? And I will right-click again on View Dataset just to preview now what happened with that new column that I mapped. So right-click on View Dataset, open it in a new tab, and go here to see that this was added. Days to 50% flowering over here. And you can filter for it over here. So the minimum should be, let's say, 70. Apply filter. 90. Or like, let's say, a maximum of 50. Yeah. You can see how you can filter the accessions then based on these numbers here. I encourage you to use this account in Sandbox and this straight data sample and try to experiment from now until the next session we have, that is in 2 weeks, to try to experiment on your own and then come with questions next time. We will continue with the remaining descriptors and we will revisit also a bit of what we did today in part 2 and also answer the questions that you might have. So thank you for joining today. Thank you for attending and for practicing also in parallel. I will make sure to share with you the recording of this webinar and the step-by-step documentation of what we did today. So thank you everybody for joining. I will stop sharing right now and I'll see you in 2 weeks.